too. It's fun. All right, let's get back into picking your brain, Chris. And I'd love
Sure.
to. I want to hear more about not only how things went for you when you were still working at Blizzard, but also some of your thoughts, and maybe you can enlighten ourselves and the listeners, and I guess the watchers right now,
Yep.
just as to maybe some of the thought processes on some of the things that you've been part of
Sure.
while you were developing or designing. All right. So I guess so. We had a bunch of people had a bunch of great questions. Some of them very specific, some of them fairly broad. I think one I kind of want to throw this one around a bit, just because it's pretty close to today. We're seeing it a lot right now,
Mm-hmm.
um, especially during. It's a big switchover. I want to talk about gearing just quickly. So, in historically, PvP was always kind of a deterministic gearing once they put in those systems throughout the ages, and then towards the more recent expansions, obviously, we started getting more RNG systems that deterministic gearing went away.
Mm-hmm.
BFA was a loot fiesta. A huge amount
Yes.
of loot was coming. It wasn't necessarily what you needed, but you
Yeah.
definitely got a lot of loot.
Yeah.
And now we're back into another expansion where there's more of a scarcity of loot, and I'm starting to see it's very interesting how the community is reacting to that, because on top of that, the PvP vendor got involved again, and so we have the deterministic. So I'm just wondering, first and foremost, what was that? What's the conversations like about that? About deterministic versus RNG, and the PvE PvP type of gearing systems. What's that? What were those conversations like while you were in house?
Interesting. Yeah, and so I mean, just to be clear, I never really worked on the itemization systems per se. You know,
Yeah.
I would contribute ideas and pitches and things to some of the designs. I helped a bit on the BFA system, just with the change to where it has certain ranks, and certain ranks unlock certain cosmetics that you unlock instantly and things like that. So a lot of those were some designs I helped with. Um, but I would say, with deterministic versus random, a lot of it just has to do with the challenge that the modern game has, or the game in general has, is just that uh, the extrinsic part of the game, the part that the that really helps the players power in the game that they progress in, right?
Hmm.
That is primarily really just pretty much the paper doll, right? The head, the chest, the bracers. It's the items, right? It's the
Yeah.
itemization system, and so um,
Yeah.
back in, say, classic, in the beginning of the game, the only way really, I mean, you would get those items from multitude of sources, from crafting, or from questing, or from
Hmm.
dungeons and raids, right? It's still kind of like how it is today, but the difference with today is just that there are so many more vectors, so many more ways that you can get items from, right?
Yep.
That you could think of Torghast, or Mythic Plus, or you get items from all over, the emissary boxes. You get items from
Yeah.
all over the
The
place,
Great
right? And
Vault.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Hmm.
so the challenge for the team is they want all these things that the player does to feel rewarding. They want them to feel like they get something out of it. And usually the thing that resonates most with the player, that they like the best, is gear, right? They want to get an
Yep.
upgrade for their gear. And so the challenge for the team is, okay, we want to make these all feel rewarding and feel like they get gear for the player, but it can't always be an upgrade. It can't always be a straight upgrade, because if it is, then you'll gear out your character in like a day, right? And
Yeah.
so there's two ways you could address that. You could say, well, it's random. Sometimes you're not always going to get the good item, right? Sometimes you're going to get something that you don't want, or something you already got, a duplicate. Um, or the other way you do it is something kind of what Lich King did, which is that they break the item apart into a currency, which is like, say, badges, right, or something like that. And so it's still deterministic, and you could still, every a lot of the different things you do in the game matter, and it feels like you're not wasting your time. I did that thing. I got some badges that I'm
Hmm.
using to save up for an item that I want, right? Kind of, which is like what PvP itemization traditionally is, and it's kind of what it is today, right? In
Yeah.
Shadowlands is that you get conquest and you spend that conquest on a piece of gear, right? And of course, it's always going to feel good to players because um, um, at least at least mindfully in their mind they might like it, but I think in hindsight what a lot of the developers thought about pure badge systems is just that it makes the game kind of feel a little soulless when you kill bosses and they just drop badges all the time. You don't get these cool kind of events where like, oh my god, I got this cool sword, I got this cool axe, or whatever it is from a boss, right? I think a lot of the happy moments in the game is getting a cool item from an encounter or whatever it is, right? And so I think there was a reluctance to just kind of turn everything to be deterministic, sort of just collect badges, and it kind of feels like a mobile game or something at that point, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think these are sort of the things going through the developers' heads when they're creating these systems. And so that said, I think the feeling among the team, among the players, among a lot of people was just that BFA was a little too random. It was a little too much, like you said, you just get flooded with loot. A lot of times it was side grades, duplicates, things you didn't really care about.
Hmm.
There's so many permutations of Azerite uh, gear and things like that. So I think they conceded that, oh, that was going too far. I think traditionally with the development of the game and with game design in general, just especially if you have a live service game, which is what WoW is a lot of times you go one way and then, oh shit, we went too far, and then you go the other. It's like a pendulum, and you swing back and
Yeah.
forth. And so the trick is to make sure that you're learning from past kind of um, challenges or designs that didn't work out and address those, but not go too far the other direction. And so I think they did there's a good balance, with learning from those things in Shadowlands. I think generally the cache is okay. I think the cache is always going to feel better in the beginning of the season because everything's an upgrade.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think what you're going to find is as the season goes on, there's going to be less things that are, best in slot or straight upgrades.
Oh yeah.
And so it's going to feel a little bit not as great then. But it's a really big challenge to make all these different features in the game feel rewarding and good, and that you're really worth your time, while at the same time not making each of the individual rewards feel just kind of not great, right? And so
Yeah.
that's kind of how I'd say it. Yeah.
Nice. I can totally relate to you because I remember running Karazhan I don't know how many times just to get enough badges to go and buy that one piece of gear from the vendor. And while yes, it felt rewarding to get some badges, running
Yeah.
the same dungeon raid over and over and over again just to get, I can't remember how many crazy, I think it was like thousands of badges to get yourself out. It was just, yeah, you got pretty tired of running that same raid over and over. It's no different than running, at least with a mythic dungeon, you're getting more gear, but and with the affixes, it gets more difficult and adds some new nuances there.
Mm-hmm.
But which is better than just running a heroic version of a dungeon for the 100th time because your RNG has just been crap, and you're looking for that one piece of gear because it's best in slot for whatever reason. So
Yeah.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are. How do you feel compare it to BFA or to the other expansions, the current itemization system or the progression system? How do you guys feel about it?
Andallyn?
Sure.
I'll let you go first.
I mean, I can talk. I can talk, specifically to the PvP aspect of it. Now, I haven't really dabbled a whole lot in the player versus environment, gearing and itemizations type of stuff, and how that feels. So I really can't speak to that. But so far, I really, really appreciate all the work and what the finished product has been in the PvP department. And mainly that's because it feels like having the honor as a currency feels really good. If I level up at all, like I just leveled my priest way at like 4 o'clock in the morning, right? And I'm able to start going into arena, getting that honor. I can take some of that easy craftable gear off of the auction house just to kind of get myself to a good starting place, and that allows me to be able to do something in PvP. And then as I get that honor, I'm able to use that honor to get the honor pieces and then upgrade from there. It feels really good also that once I've done that for a little while and I've started to collect some of that conquest gear, collecting all that honor, once I hit a certain rating, like, all right, great, I hit 1600, boom, we're going to bump all this up to 207 item level. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to push with that, and now you hit 1800. You bump that up to 213, or sorry, I can't remember exactly what the number is. Chat, you guys know exactly what the numbers are, but yeah, you get the idea. That progression feels really good. It's really nice. The bad part about that is, especially early on in the season, we were told the great thing about this iteration of gear and gearing out in PvP was you didn't have to PvE. Right? That was one of the big things that, I guess, from the PvP community that they wanted to see kind of implemented. And I think there was maybe a little bit of a disconnection there, because at the same time, if you wanted to have the raw stats, which are going to be king in PvP, you needed to do some Mythic Plus. You needed to use all the avenues other than just PvP to get to be able to have the best gear to walk into the arena with. And so there was a little bit of a confusion, I think, that I saw in that regard, but it makes sense, and you should be rewarded for playing all aspects of the game. But I think what I would have liked to have seen, again, I think the system right now is really good. I would have liked to have seen where PvP could have given out the same amount of gear as Mythic Plus, so much so that, like, you didn't have to do some Mythic Plus to just stay afloat. Like if you were able to push up to a high rating in PvP, you could get that item level to be high enough. But if you were floating around 16, 1800, maybe 1900, you were missing out by the Mythic Plus became much lower hanging fruit, so to speak. And you had to be able to do that in order to stay above the item level curve. So that's really just my thoughts about, like, currently how that looks. But Gerissar, what do you think, man?
As a casual, the PvP gearing system, hidden and the ranking upgrade tied to renown, feels like a kick to the nuts. I'm not gonna. That's that part is really sour fruit in my mouth. And for that, so PvE, but I get it. It's randos. It's just common PvP, if you will. There's no rating tied to ranking up. So I guess in that way, the higher item levels of the conquest gear has to be tied behind rating. Something had to be tied behind the higher ranks of the unranked PvP gear. But the amount of grinding that it takes to get that up makes it less appetizing than running Mythic Pluses, even with the gear scarcity that's dropping out of Mythic Pluses. I don't fully agree with you, Andallyn, because I remember there was an interview, and Ian Hazzikostas actually said where the PvP vendor system was an 80% solution. If you wanted to get 100% best in slot, you were going to have to do rating, you were going to have to do Mythic Pluses, you were going to have to do all the other gameplay systems to get all that gear. And I think they kind of hit that on the mark, really. It's and definitely much better than the first iteration of what we saw the vendor on the beta. I know, actually, I'm going to point out Drown Lord in chat here. He's been very vocal in our Discord of what he thought about the PvP gearing system, and he still has iterated how much he misses the Warlords of Draenor version of gearing, where there really wasn't any ranking. It was just an honor grinding system, and to him, and from his friends and his point of view, that was probably one of the epitomes of gearing that we've seen for PvP vendoring in his gameplay time. What we're seeing in Shadowlands, though, I would say the comparison of what we've experienced since, let's say, Legion or Warlords of Draenor, Legion this is better, definitely much better than what we were experiencing in BFA, and I'm thankful for that. I was so done after BFA, but I do enjoy this. Even if I'm just casually playing, I still feel like everything I'm doing has been rewarding. I'm getting upgrades, be it gear, conduits. I'm increasing my renown, which is giving me more soul binds. I get it, working through these weekly quests, going through storyline. It's all felt rewarding, and to that, I'm enjoying myself. But also, I'm not bleeding edge. I'm not grinding out hours upon hours in Torghast to maximize my soul ash. I'm not grinding out hours upon hours in random BGs to grind out enough honor to upgrade my rankings. I'm not killing myself over a game, and I think from that point of view, everything feels like it kind of hit the mark. But yeah, the idea that even if I was playing more, I would still have lower item level gear than Mythic Plus, just because we were tied behind Renown, and Renown hasn't been allowed to get to a level where I could actually get over almost item level 200 through honor ranking. So that's sour milk, really. So that's my point of view. Anyway.
Yeah, see, this is where you and I kind of diverge in opinion there, Gerissar, because I take a little bit more, and like some people agree with me on this, some people don't. I appreciate hearing different points of view, but I kind of subscribe more to the idea that higher item levels should be exclusively from rated or higher level content. And I feel like if someone's playing the game and they're like, "Hey, I just want to do BGs. I just, and that's what I enjoy, and that's my thing," then they should get BG gear. And that I feel like it's not right for there to be a certain expectation that, hey, how come I don't have mythic, raid tier gear as someone who just does.
That's not what I said.
Well, you know what I mean. Sorry, I emphasize a little bit to kind of make the point. But
yeah,
this is where we kind of diverge.
I think you guys. Sorry, I think you guys are both right. Which is just that. Yes, certainly, kind of the best gear should be sort of reserved for kind of to players who are able to defeat the highest difficulty things in the game, which is really mythic raid bosses or high ranks in arena, right? But I also think it's true also that it doesn't feel good for a player where they have a progression path of what they're trying to improve their gear and trying to unlock new things and progress, and then they just stop, right? It's just like I can't progress anymore. Okay, what do I do? And so I think both of those things are important, and it's important for the game to be able to make sure that even for a casual, I hate the word casual, right? Because whatever, you could be a casual hardcore player as well.
Yeah.
But for the type of player who's unable to say get 2300 ranking, to be able to keep progressing their gear and feel like they're making progress, right? Like that's what the game's supposed to be about. And so there's ways to do that. It's it's very hard to do that. It's hard to create progression paths for every type of, because there's so many types of players who play WoW, right? But that's kind of the goal. That's kind of like the North Star that the team should be trying to design for.
For sure.
But
I think we should have a gear progression system through pet battles.
yeah. I don't even know. There might even be one. Yeah.
No. There isn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I'm sure Fiesel would love that. Yeah.
All right.
Can I ask one
That was
question?
huge.
Let me ask one question here, Chris. I kind of like to hear. I saw we have Stoops is over in our chat too. Stoops did a really good job. I thought, hey man, how's it going? Thanks for coming on our show a couple months ago. But he made some really good videos and put out some really good content, and really did a great job articulating what we kind of wanted to see, and putting some really positive feedback together to kind of help other people realize, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I thought one of the best things he talked about was how there was that progression of gear, where in the same way that you would do Mythic Plus to gear out to be able to go into the raid, the same way you would do Battlegrounds to gear up for the arena. I'm kind of curious, what kind of is that kind of how the team is kind of seeing and intending that type of gearing progression to work, or do they see gearing progression as more so being affected by different factors, like maybe we want it to take you about like 6 weeks to gear, or being more of like a time gated thing, or rather than just like if that makes sense. What other kind of factors are they looking at, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good story to have in the game, which is just basically, you level up, you get gear from quest rewards, from different objectives in the world as a player, and then eventually you go into dungeons and you defeat creatures there, and then eventually you move into raids, and so it has this like kind of cool player story of going from one system to another. And so certainly you always feel that in the expansion. I think that's where it always feels best, is like in the beginning of the expansion, you're doing a variety of different things. It feels like you're going through this journey, right? It's harder to do that. I think the expansions do this less well, or sorry, the seasons do this less well than an expansion does, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that the goal is necessarily that say in the beginning of a season that you do battlegrounds, and then you eventually progress into arenas and that sort of thing. I think that ends up happening though, because usually in the beginning of a season, the rated play is not even open yet, and so a lot of the kind of grind is you do battlegrounds. Where it becomes challenging is, we would like to think about players being more holistic, and like they like all parts of the game. And PvPers they like battlegrounds, they like arenas, they like epic battlegrounds, whatever. But as we know, some players prefer some content over another. And when you make an arena player have to do random battlegrounds or rated battlegrounds, they get kind of grumpy about that, right? And so it depends on what the vision of the game is. Is it supposed to be that they all do these variety of things and that's how it's supposed to be, or is it more of like pick and choose what you want to do and there's a progression path for each of them? And so I think the game always dances between both of those ideas, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we're like, yes, we want everybody to do everything, and that's the best way to play the game. And sometimes we're like, oh, it seems like players get really grumpy about that, so let's not do that. And so I think it's up to the players to really be vocal about what they want from the game, right? And is that really what we want from the game, is to have a sort of progression story where you go from battlegrounds to arenas or something? Because I'm sure there's battleground players who do RPGs and whatnot. I was just watching some 3K rated RPG stream a friend of mine linked me the other night. I'm not sure they would really feel like BGs are a stepping stone to arenas. I feel like they would think,
Sure.
It's a system and has depth and has a progression system in itself,
Totally.
right? And so it's a challenging question I don't think there's a right answer to that, right? And it's up to the leadership of the team to really make that call. But
well, let's stop talking about gear. Let's stop. I think we've done a great job on that.
Yeah. Sorry.
I would love to pick your brain a bit more on classes and specs, if we can kind of shift over to that way. And this one's going to be tongue in cheek a little bit, but why is Rogue Mage X always such strong? Like, is there did you guys sit down at the table and say, okay, we have to make 1 3s comp and it's always going to be amazing? It's going to be. And did you guys roll dice and say Rogue and Mage and that's who won? Or okay, that's tongue in cheek. I'm being funny.
Yeah. No.
I really want to know though. There seems to be always as the the PvP seasons have gone through, there always seems to be the flavor of the month. There always seems to be this one spec that is better than, or just easier to play. And there was a suspicion, and I just want to, I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but there's a suspicion a while ago that I want to say this was around Legion, or maybe a little bit before that, but flavor of the months would start cycling, and it was almost like it forced players to pay for boosts to get that next flavor of the month up.
It's like the Chinese calendar.
Yeah, kind of. But
this is the year of the druid.
I'm just getting curious. The real question though is what's the conversations like when you guys sit down and say, okay, this spec is having a problem, let's look at it, let's revamp it, and can you take us through what that kind of looks like? Because I know you had a good part to what it sounds like you had a good part to a lot of the redesigns of some of the classes that we've come to love over the time. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I wouldn't say there's some sort of conspiracy with, say, RMP or anything like that. It just so happens that the specs just have so much synergy together,
Right.
A lot of times the designers can be kind of surgical in the ways that they try to adjust the comps by, moving different DR categories, like now fear DRs with kidney or something like that. And that's how they would address, say, Warlock Rogue or something if it becomes a problem, or things like that.
Okay.
And so I think, unfortunately, one of the realities in the game is just that WoW is predominantly more of a PvE game, right? PvP is kind of a smaller part to it in terms of really the production budget of where they spend their time working on features or on balance or on things like that. And also kind of in the mind share of the kind of developers on the team. When I joined the team, Tom Chilton was the game director who came from Ultima Online, and he was very big about PvP. And Kevin Jordan was always on the team as well, who really loved world PvP and PvP in general. Tom Chilton was the one who created kind of the arena system and rated battleground system and things like that. And so it's and so really kind of the focus is not so much on PvP really, but and so a lot of times I think what the players think about a lot of the specs and things like this or comps is that they're sort of like engineered, like, oh, we're gonna these specs are supposed to work together, or this comp is supposed to be the comp. Really, it's just kind of, you design all the classes to be fun and have depth and be interesting, and if you can, to create some cross-class, cross-spec synergies, and then it kind of organically happens, right?
Okay.
Sure.
And so that's just kind of how it is. Although I would say in Legion, there's a concerted effort, mostly by me, to try to engineer comps. And that was done through the PvP talent system, right?
Okay.
I was trying to engineer certain comps and synergies that would work together through that system. But generally, it's not so premeditated, I would say, in terms of what comps or specs or things are strong or weak. Generally, I think that's kind of sort of a weakness of the team. I think it would be in a better spot if they were more premeditated with it, right? If they were more thinking before stuff happened, if what would be good or bad. But and so instead, they're a little more reactionary, right? Like they're like, well, this comp is tanks are destroying arena or something. Well, then they nerf the tank, right? Whereas it would have been better to more think about that in the beginning before the season went live or whatever, to make sure that didn't happen. But in the grand scheme of things, making WoW is such a monster of a game, and there's so many moving parts, right? And so it's hard to test all these things in the beginning before it goes live. I think in the ideal world, every comp would be tested, every synergy would be, surgically looked at, but with the current team size of on the game and how big the game is and whatever, it's just not really the reality. And so
QA would probably take another 6 months just trying to test out all the comps.
Exactly, yeah, and it's not to say that there isn't people who want to do these things or that people aren't doing them. Certainly they are. It's just it may not be enough energy and focus that say a lot of hardcore arena or PvP players would like, or even that I would like. But it's just sort of the reality of the game and what the project is like.
So this may be a stupid question, and so forgive me, but do you, in terms of like the breakup, do you have devs who are just in charge of class and they handle all the classes, or do you have some people who maybe specialize and be like, hey, these people handle mage and they look at all the interactions with mage, and and these, and kind of divvied out by class to where they come to the table and be like, hey guys, you might be forgetting about mages here in this regard, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, before I worked at Blizzard, when as a player, I always envisioned like there must be like a druid designer and a priest designer and whatever, right? There was like an office for each class or something, because it makes sense thinking about it, right? But the reality was, it was really kind of like 3 or 4 designers who they weren't even class designers. They did everything. A lot of them did quests, some of them did items, some of them did raids, but they also worked on classes, right? They're kind of generalist designers, and so they all kind of collaborated together on that. It was only after when I joined that really kind of a class team was sort of created, right? For a while, it was just me and Kevin Jordan working on classes, and the way that we did it then was Kevin would do half the classes and I would do half, and so I was doing, say, priest and druid and shaman and warlock and things like that, and Kevin was doing rogue and paladin and whatever it was. And so I kind of like that model when the team was smaller, just because it was good to have somebody who knew the class intimately, who kind of knew how the gameplay worked, and were kind of an advocate for the class, right? But I think over time, it's sort of, there was challenges with that when we added other people to the team, or it grew, because some people would be very protective of that class, right?
Yeah.
They'd be like, "Oh no!"
I can't imagine that would ever happen.
It's my
yeah,
baby.
exactly, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, you get that in the team all the time. There'd be certain people coming to me and say, different engineers or designers or artists or whoever were, and I would nerf a class and be like, "Why'd you nerf my class?" And I was like, "Well, you guys are just, it's broken," and then we debate for like an hour or so about it, and it gets very emotional, it's and so but then you'd also get that. I can
just imagine this down in the Starbucks right now, just like
yeah. I think the biggest drama was the warrior. It felt like the whole team was playing warriors back in the day, and it just, you couldn't touch the warrior. If you touched the warrior, then you'd have 4 people in your office. So but anyways, my point is just that there's challenges with this model as well, where if like I said, there'd be some developers who would be very emotional about the class and wouldn't want to nerf it and stuff. And so and then I would say kind of now really how the team works is it's more kind of like how it used to be before I joined, where it's there is some sort of like someone is kind of tanking a class, right? There's someone who does most of the druid things or whatever, but it isn't so much like it's theirs, right? It's not like they own it,
Sure.
And so it's sort of a hybrid of the two. So that's kind of really how the structure is right now. And so I think there's pros and cons to both. I think, like I said, it's good when there is an advocate for the class, just because they know the class inside and out. Sometimes, one of the classes could have somebody, no one on the team really plays them or really kind of knows them in and out. And that can be challenging because, when you got to create Azerite essences or conduits for them, you really need to know how the class works intimately to create those, right? And so, sorry, that was kind of a long answer.
That's good. I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense. Because, sometimes, especially BFA was notorious for this. I felt like you'd sometimes just get like a class that was just kind of like put in a corner and just left in the corner, kind of like Affliction Lock in BFA, at least in PvP. And it was just like, I don't know if it's necessarily more. So, I guess you could have a good conversation on whether or not it was more so because Destro just overshadowed Affliction, or if it was just that Affliction was just missing a few nuts and bolts. But that's just kind of why I asked, because I feel like there, in my like little imagination of how this is all going, there's some like warlock ambassador that's just be like, for months I've had issues with Affliction, or something like that. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense though.
Actually, sorry, that kind of tweaks me a little bit. This was something that was brought up in Twitter, on my Discord, or on our Discord.
Yeah.
It's happening in the Twitch chat right now. There's sometimes when it seems like the team is extremely reactive, and we get a balancing shift. There's a hot fix done almost immediately. And then there's other times where the community sees a problem, they highlight it in numerous fashions, YouTube videos, Discord, Reddit posts, up on the forums and everything. Yeah. And it seems like all that feedback just seems completely ignored for months. And I'm assuming that it's because there's other stuff that's higher priority, or there's a conversation. There's just so many conversations that's just trying to find what's the best way to correct that concern. And sometimes the answer isn't as simple as the community tries to make it look like. But what I'm assuming you must have been part of some of those conversations. What was that like from your point of view? Seeing the stuff from the community, and then the conversations in behind the door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of really depends on like what it is. I think it's different for each situation. Like, I think a lot of times what it is, why it takes a while, is because there may be a disagreement among the team about what should happen, and so that really stalls things. If everyone, the way the kind of team works today, which is something I don't really love, which is there always has to be sort of consensus on something, right? Yeah. And so if you want consensus, well, it takes a while. And so it takes a while to convince everybody that this should be done, right?
Yep.
And there's always a desire to make sure when you do a change that it hits the mark. People don't want to send out a half-baked solution, right? And so that could take a while. And yes, like you said, it could also take a while because the team has a lot of other things going on, I think during BFA, there's a lot of, it feels like nothing's happening, but behind the scenes, a lot of stuff is happening in terms of creating content for the next patch or for the next expansion or whatever it is, right? And so the team is never just sort of sitting around doing nothing. They're always heavily doing something. It's just that there's a lot of stuff to do. And so a lot of times, unfortunately, PvP balance can be on a lower priority. I think where you see usually a lot of energy spent on it is usually when, say, things get really bad, or if it's before a tournament or something. So, yeah. And so, I guess that's kind of what I would say about that, I guess.
Okay. So did the tournaments or the esports make a play into that, into the delays, or this has to get fixed tomorrow, because if it doesn't, the tournament's going to be really borked?
Well, there are some situations where you want to make sure that you don't do too big of swing of changes right before a tournament, because if everyone has their comp and is practicing and ready to go, and then they get nerfed in half, it just it's not a great times there. So certainly, there's some certain sensitive timing when some changes are made. But I think that usually the tournaments are towards kind of, say, the end of a season. So usually most of the issues prop up at the beginning, and so I would say that usually doesn't really factor in that often, but it can for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I remember. Oh shoot, I'm gonna get this wrong again. I think it was Legion, the first set of cups where the tank trinkets were involved, and then what was it that happened? Then there's that PvP trinket, the the Maledict trinket
Yep.
had to get inputted, just because I think that was some of the worst dampening we'd seen in a arena tournament for I don't know how many years before that. I think we hit new highs.
Yeah, yeah,
So that was...
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of situation BFA was just there was a lot of itemization created that was for PvE that affected PvP, and really they were just sort of reaction. Basically, the team had to react and kind of what they PvP molt them or reduce them in PvP. And sometimes, like, yeah, it wasn't so much that the team didn't know about it. It was just that there's a lot of other stuff and things like that. I can't remember the exact situation with that one, but I know it was a big topic among the team for sure.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Interesting. That one was, and I think the worst was that some people saw it coming, but then when it actually went live and saw it in gameplay, it was a little insane.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, a lot of times you'll see players just kind of upset that PvP balance has been screwed up, and a lot of times though it isn't so much the core classes, or it isn't even PvP talents or anything like that. It's usually items, right? Which is not the domain of the class designers or the PvP team. It's another team, and so a lot of times the class designers don't even know that this item is being created or will really have this big of an impact in PvP until kind of goes live, or probably later than we would like in production. And so that's kind of usually where that comes from, and a lot of it's because there's so many items being created for patches, and there's so much going on that not everyone knows what's going on. A lot of times a lot of developers on the team only know when things are going sometimes they see things and say MMO champion or WoW head and go, oh, I didn't even know that was being added to the game, because the team is the game is so big.
Well,
it's expansive.
And I guess if the item dev doesn't PvP or isn't thinking in that, they're only thinking PvE centric, or hey, wouldn't this be really cool out in the wild and da-da-da. But yeah, wow.
Which can also happen. There are some developers who are more aligned to one part of the game than another, and that could be a challenge. I was always a player who did both things in the game. I have Atiash and Valinir and other PvE legendaries that I got from raiding, and then also I did arena at a higher level and raided battlegrounds and things like that. So it was more of a more well-rounded dev, but you're not going to get that same situation with every developer, right? You're going to have some who are more into one part of the game than another, and that could be a challenge for sure, like you said.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's a good thing though too. So that makes sense.
Yeah. You want to have a diverse group of people who care about a lot of different parts of the game, right?
Yeah. So when kind of following in that same topic of class balance, I'm kind of curious, what's the general consensus maybe? Because you mentioned it's very difficult to get to that consensus, but do you think that that everyone collectively kind of has a feeling that, hey, our game is pretty balanced right now, or do you think more often they're just like, we're really far behind on where the balance needs to be? Where's maybe the mindset in terms of, if you can speak to that?
Yeah, sorry, you cut out a little bit from me.
Oh, sorry.
It's just the mindset of where balance is generally at different times, or
because I'm just wondering, so when these conversations are coming together about nerfs and buffs and significant changes, especially in the PvP domain, I'm kind of curious, are people coming and having a hard time coming to a consensus because there's more of an opinion that something needs to happen and it needs to happen now, or more of an opinion that the game is really more balanced than you think, or just kind of wondering maybe where the side of the majority kind of lies.
I think the challenge in consensus is just whether the change it depends on what it is and like what the change is being advocated to change something. If it's just like nerfing the damage to something, that could be simple, right? If it's
Mm-hmm.
reducing the cooldown of an ability or whatever, if, for example, if you have Life Cocoon for Mistweaver or something, Life Cocoon is really good, or it happens too often, the PvP designers or the kind of suggestion for PvP could be like, well, make the cooldown longer or something like that. And that could make sense for PvP, but not for PvE. And so that's kind of where maybe an example of consensus could be a challenge, right? And so, and then there's always kind of, even when something sounds easy, like, oh, well, just make it different in PvP. Well, part of our principles, kind of the philosophy and principles on the team is just kind of, you want the game to be the game to be elegant and easy to understand. And so if you're going to have all these different rule sets for an ability, and you use it in PvP and it does one thing, you use it in PvE, it does another thing. When you use it in the open world, does another thing. Like that can be not great. And so so it's always trying to figure out what the best fix is, or best way to address something, right? And so so those are some of the things that would kind of make consensus kind of a challenge, And again, some other times it could be something emotional. It could be someone's just like, they don't want this ability to be changed drastically in the game, or they feel it's fine. They feel like, no, that's fine. Players are just, they don't understand or something, right? That could also happen sometimes, And sometimes, the players don't always right either, or they don't know what the best answer is either, sometimes. And so that's part of what the role as a designer is to do, is to take all the feedback and hear all the perspectives and make a decision about what the best way to, the best answer is.
So do you guys, this might be a little awkward question, but are all players' opinions equal, or do you favor the opinions of some players over others?
I don't know if it's just like kind of favoring one type of player over another.
Maybe, or put more merit in someone's. Yeah, exactly. Like in the same way that you might, say, hey, these guys play the game at a high level. Do we,
There was a joke at one point that a change didn't happen until Sea-Doo made a tweet about it. So,
well, I mean, sometimes it's not so much that Sea-Doo making a tweet about it, or Sea-Doo in particular. It's just maybe that it got a lot more visibility when he said it, right, or something like that. Right?
Sure.
I think usually there's multiple ways you can interpret players' feedback. Sometimes it's long page threads on a forum, or Reddit posts, or tweets, or someone on the team voicing a concern that they felt in the game, or sometimes in analytics. Like sometimes you could tell that players are upset about something through data, and so there's all these different ways. I wouldn't say any of them are more important than another. It depends on what the content is, right? Like if it's going to be, sometimes they may listen more to the high-end raid community, because usually they're kind of on the front lines of different encounters or progression, and so they, a lot of times they probably have more insight on that than someone else. But I think the team, they want the experience for the player to be enjoyable no matter who they are,
for sure.
And really the Sea-Doos or the methods or whoever they are, and is kind of, they're a smaller percentage of the players, right? And so they're not going to do a change that only pleases them but upsets everybody. So
interesting. That makes sense. It seems like it just from the outside, and only seeing when you're only looking at certain things, and when you see somebody make a post or something, and all of a sudden the change happens. For all we know, there could have been a forum post a month ago on it, and not being aware because we're not paying attention to that, or whatever the case be. So,
yeah, well,
that makes sense.
Sometimes you may see a smaller number of players voice concerns about it or something, and the team has already have recognized it's a problem, is already thinking about solutions or implementing them. And then by the time that they've come up with a solution, Sea-Doo may have tweeted about it, and then
Sure.
you know, then you're going to correlate, well, it's just they only did it because CD tweeted about it. Well,
Exactly.
you know, behind the scenes, they actually were thinking about it. You know, it's
Yeah.
just so
It's
yeah,
better
it just
than
depends on what it is. You know.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It only there's only a lightning storm when I fart, because every time I fart, there's a lightning storm. Right?
Yeah,
Precisely.
exactly.
Is that how the correlation works?
Something
Right.
like that.
So, oh man, so many questions. I want to change just slightly from specs over to maps. So, in the time you were here, you're at Blizzard, you were actively involved in, I think, Ashran, Seething Shore, implemented. Sorry, I have to bring up your resume. I got to do this because I'm going to forget it all. You did Seething Shore. You're part of Ashran. You were part of the redo of Arathi and Warsong Gulch. You part of the arenas for Mukambala, Robodrome, Hook Point, and also the new Bastion arena. That both of those are very varied. I mean, we got the epic battleground gameplay. We got the how Ashran played as a big tug of war. Oh, sorry, I also missed Ashman Fallen, Blackbrick Hold. So these small boxes versus big boxes, different. Obviously, arenas are all about, you know, it's King of the Hill basically, right? So what was that? What how did that go, from beginning to end? And I guess let's talk epic battlegrounds first. The part of the Ashran, let's say, starting from concept to fulfillment, and also then later on, post mortem, the player feedback and reaction to those. How did that go, and how did that feel for you? Just a
Yeah,
small
good
question.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
It's
yeah, I'll just give a little background. You know, what I mainly did at Blizzard when I first started and for many years was classes. I did class design, gameplay for a long time. When I first started, I was more wanting to work on PvP content and system design. I work with the director on the Rated Battleground system, which was something I cared more about. You know, I thought I liked Rated Arena, but I really liked the idea of Rated Battlegrounds because that is what my guild did in the game. We really did competitive battlegrounds with the other faction on our server, and that was really the most thrilling thing for me. I really liked objective-based gameplay versus just deathmatch. But you know, I did like Arena too. It just I felt like they weren't giving battlegrounds and whatnot a chance. And so, anyways, but you know, when I first started, I was just so got pulled in to work on classes, so I had no time to really work on, you know, really a lot of battleground or PvP stuff. It wasn't until I think after the monk class. The monk class was really the last class design thing I did until Shadowlands that I worked on, Shadow Priest, and then that was pretty much the last two classings I worked on. But so yeah, and so after I worked on the monk, I did some other things. There's some R&D things on the team that didn't come out that I was working on, but then I also did a lot of content for PvP, which, yeah, like you said, is different battleground things, up-reses of maps. I also worked on the up-res of the Nagrand Arena and Blade's Edge and a couple others.
Sorry,
and so yeah, it's a varied amount of different things, and I mean, I like all of them. I do all of them, and each of them were fun and interesting in their own ways. You know, I liked working on the up-res maps of like Warsong and Arathi because it was a challenge to make it newer, but then keep the soul of the original, right? Which was really important to me.
For sure.
And so I think the artists did an incredible job with those, you know, and it's really hard to up-res the map while keeping the collision. You know, we kind of stressed pixel by pixel, was it like the original, you know, and we had long discussions over if they're going to be different if it was an upgrade. And so there's a lot of care taken to doing those things, right? And so I like that. And with Ashran was a lot of fun. It was a lot of lot of work. There was a lot of like random stuff we put into there. I did, the class books that you get in there were a lot of fun, and all the different objectives and events, and it was just really a sandbox of craziness in there, right? And uh, kind of the inspiration for it was old AV, which was in an Ashran and in Warlords, it wasn't so much a battleground as it was really kind of a zone. It was supposed to be like kind of a PvP zone, right? Which is what AV was. AV was not in the beginning, not really an instance or a battleground. It was really a zone, And so that's kind of what the inspiration with this was kind of resurrect a lot of that. But there's a lot of challenges with, I think, doing a PvP zone like that is like one of the more challenging things you could do in design, because not only are you creating all this like content here, but you're also factoring in really the it's easy when you create PvE content because you just create a monster and do some scripted abilities and you're done. But when it's a player versus player, you have to think a lot about what is going through the other players' heads. What is the meta game going to turn into? You have to do a lot of thought about how are they going to play in the map. With Ashran, there's the beginning idea was supposed to be a lot of the inspiration is kind of world PvP. So it's supposed to be kind of more people are running around the zone doing different objectives, and then sometimes they'll get in PvP fights, and that will be fun, right? But with player behavior, a lot of times is just that they want to group up into a big group, right? Because that's just player behavior. And so it's a challenge to create a zone that has all these different things around it when the players will just kind of want to roll in a big group because it's safety in numbers. It just makes sense from a human perspective, right?
Yeah.
And so that's those are some challenges when you design things like that. And so with Astron, it was kind of annoying. It was a challenge with, like, say, the mid lane versus kind of the objectives and things on the outskirts, right? And making sure that and then it also becomes a problem when there's a group of players grouped up like 40 versus 40, and in terms of performance, because your computer is going to lag if there's like 80 people all spamming AoEs at the same area, right? And so there's a lot of challenges with that, I think.
Sorry. Just imagining all that AoE, the servers must just like.
Oh yeah. That's a whole other discussion too. But I think there's some things in Ashran that I felt. The other thing with Ashran too is just it was a collaboration with me and other designers who kind of disagreed with what the vision of it was. One of us kind of felt it was more supposed to be like a battleground. Some of us thought it was more supposed to be like old AV, and that was another challenge with developing it. But there's a lot of cool things that came out of Ashran, I think. Like, I think it was the first time in the game we did like faction tap was in the zone, and a lot of the spell, the spell books were really cool, and I had a lot of good. It was interesting because there's one point Mike Morheim got emailed from somebody after we changed Ashran. I think we retired Ashran after Warlords or something like that, and he got emailed a bunch from some hardcore Ashran communities who would do organized Ashrans, right? After they removed it, there was some woman she was like, I think in her 60s or something, who her favorite thing to do in the game was Ashran, and so she played with a community who all did Ashran together a few nights a week, and so she really was upset, emotional about Ashran going away, and so she emailed Mike Morheim to plead not to remove it, and so he forwarded it to us and just said, what's this about? And so I think what's interesting about WoW is WoW has so many different features, so many different content, and so many different people who play it. And so even when you don't like something or like some battleground or like some content, there's somebody out there who really does, and so you have to be mindful of that. And so I think what becomes a challenge, or what becomes something we have to think about, is sometimes we make players do some content that they don't like. Like there is this weekly that you do for Epic Battlegrounds, right? And some people really hate doing epic battlegrounds because they just don't like that gameplay style, right? And so
Mhm.
we have to be careful about forcing players to do content that they don't like, right? And so again, it's complicated because you also want to encourage them to branch out and do other things. And so you could see where I'm, you could see the
the implications.
why that's
I sure this is
100%.
going. Yeah. So I guess just to tie that in then, when you guys brought Ashran back and put it onto the Epic and did that, I guess at the same time you did that split, you did the Epic BGs versus the regular BGs. Did you see any shift from the community, both in the metrics of how many people were playing the Epic BGs, and also the commentary, be it in throughout the communities and that? Did you see Epic BGs being well received, or did you see less well received? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think the metrics were pretty healthy with how many people did Epic BGs, and the response was pretty positive. Epic BGs are kind of one of the harder content to design around because in the game, depending on what the meta is and depending on how long it takes to kill a player, an Epic BG can feel really annoying because no one dies. Everyone just like is a 40 versus 40. No one ever dies, right?
Yeah.
And on the other hand,
team fight.
yeah, exactly. And on the other hand, it can become annoying when players die too quickly, and then because I feel like Wintergrass kind of feels like this right now. It's just like everyone dies so quickly from the vehicles or from whatever it is, and so that can shift kind of the experience in the map. So it's very sensitive to what the meta in the game is, and so it really takes a lot of attention to tune the maps to make sure that they're in a good state. I know, like I wasn't on a team at Shadowlands launch, and so I know there was some issues with AV scaling, and you could just kill Drekthar with all the guards up or whatever it is, and so things like that, it requires some upkeep, right? And so and with Ashran, you asked about Battleground version versus the Brawl version. Yeah, really with Ashran, it had so much going on with the events and all these other things that it didn't make sense to have for an Epic BG, which is kind of like maximum. You really want, like, say, a half an hour to 45 minutes. That's kind of on the longer side of how the match should be. And so Ashran is kind of supposed to be like an endless battleground. And so it didn't really make sense to put it into an Epic BG. And so some changes had to be made for that. We added like a reinforcement count, I think, and some changes like that. And so we stripped a lot of the events and other side stuff out of the Epic BG version, but then we retained that in the classic kind of Brawl. And so if you're really somebody who loved Ashran as it was, which we had a lot of people who did really like that version of it, that experience, it does exist in that form. And so
I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Having the different iterations for different people. I know a lot of people have really enjoyed the 6v6 versions of.
Yes, absolutely.
So that the question has often been asked of why isn't this now how RBGs are? Like, why don't we have 6v6 RBGs instead of 10v10, stuff like that? But I guess I think I remember talking with Jared one BlizzCon about that, and he was saying how a lot of those were just like really fun ideas of what we could do, what you guys could do with BGs. But I think the concern was that 6v6 and map size in such a large area, there's a balance there as well, and I think it has a bit of an issue. It's still not saying that you guys didn't want to do it, but then also again competing priorities and everything else. So
yeah, I agree. I do definitely like that Brawl when it's up, because it does feel like it's a little more skill based. It's a little more exciting. It's kind of a mix between BGs and Arena in some ways, right?
Yeah.
You definitely feel the impact of each individual player a lot more in 6 vs 6 than you do in, say, 10 or 15 vs 15 or whatever it is. And so, yeah, I definitely agree. I think it is a great format. I think the challenge with that one is not every map works with 6 for 6.
Yeah.
Arathi Basin is really not a great map in 6 for 6. And so
Mhm.
the question is, what do you, if you're going to change rated to 6 for 6, let's say, what do you do with some of those maps, right? Maybe you create new maps that are more conducive to 6 for 6, but then, Arathi Basin is one of the more enjoyable battlegrounds for a lot of people. And so is that okay? And so it's complicated, but I definitely think the team and I like 6 for 6. And so I think it's a possibility that you may see that grow in some way in the future.
Did you just confirm a 6v6 Maldraxxus BG? Is that what I just heard?
Yeah, that
kidding,
would
I'm
be
kidding.
fun.
There it is.
What do you
You
think the
heard
Maldraxxus BG should be? What kind of gameplay you think?
Oh, honestly, I think it should be a flag King of the Hill in the center of the arena. So you have the Coliseum there,
Yes.
I like
but
that.
but have
Yeah.
the Coliseum, have the map actually go to outside, so you can actually run around outside of the Coliseum.
Yes.
But
I like that. I like that.
yeah.
And by defeating other players, you consume their power, and you just get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I like that. I like that.
but it only works if you're undead because you actually eat them.
Mega elites.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like the idea. I think I really love some of the best things about WoW is the world, is the zones, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm always a big advocate of doing more arenas and more battlegrounds, just because I love going into the BG and getting a slice of that expansion, of that kind of world in the battleground. I like going into Eye of the Storm and going, oh yeah, I remember Nether Storm is so cool.
Yep.
Whenever I play with my friends and we queue a battleground, we get different battlegrounds. Everyone always remarks about how the nostalgia they had for that zone, and you hear the music and it brings you back. And so I think as battlegrounds and arena are a great way to kind of put that zone into kind of a time capsule, and that you'll always kind of experience every time you queue. And so it kind of makes it, it just kind of keeps it fresh, right? It keeps it in the rotation, keeps you there, because a lot of times you don't go back to these old zones day to day as much, right? And so
yeah, for sure.
I definitely agree. There's the zones and Shadowlands are amazing, and I would love to see more arenas and battlegrounds with those zones. It's just a question of, do they have the time, the budget to do it? And so yeah, I think it's if you care about those things, you should make your voice heard on the forums or on Twitter or whatever to advocate.
Okay.
So what's the best place? Is the official forums the best place to reach a dev's ear? Or because I've heard Reddit, I've heard Twitter, I've heard like as far as I know, the community team kind of goes through everything, right?
Yeah,
they do.
And there's no one place.
There's no real one place. I think. Good question. I think a good idea is whenever they do an AMA or some sort of community question or something event, you could ask the question there, advocate for it there. When Ian answers questions in one of those update videos, things like that. I think that's a good, because you get it in their mind fresh, when they see that. Yeah. So
I was laughing because somebody in Twitch chat just said Asman Gold chat.
I was laughing at that too.
Exactly. Yeah. That's where they're all at. They're all reading Asman Gold's chat.
Yeah.
Don't you guys just have that streaming in the back? In some boardroom or down in the cafeteria. It's always Asman Gold sitting up there.
Yeah, they do have random streams in a lot of the coffee rooms that rotate around the different streams. So yeah.
I was joking.
Sometimes you do see. Yeah, sometimes you do see Asman Gold stream while you're having coffee in a room. Yeah.
You're just having coffee. Funny. Blizzard.
What's that?
Yeah, I'm just imagining watching his stream in HQ or whatever. Just been like,
man,
oh man.
Suddenly, I'm just imagining a bunch of people sitting around in a Blizzard office, drinking coffee, listening to Blue Please in the old Warcraft radio days.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! All right. I just realized we've been talking for almost 2 hours here.
Yeah, we probably need to be.
Wow, yeah, that's
and I kind of
blew by.
yeah, and I kind of promised you only about 2 hours. It's up to you, Chris. We can keep going for a little bit longer, or we can start going to the tail end on this. How you feeling?
I could probably do like at least like 15, 20 minutes or so. I do have like a raid I got to get to at 7, after a little bit after 7, but yeah.
Okay. Well then,
yeah, we're gonna try to do next on Classic, but we'll see if that happens. It might not happen.
Wow. How do you feel? Because my understanding is that they got rid of the attunement requirement to get into Nax on Classic. Is that true? Because there used to be the attunement you had to get where you had to have to be able to get the orb to then portal up to get into Naxxramas during vanilla. Did they get rid of that for Classic?
Oh, I guess maybe they did. Because yeah, I think the only attunement I did was just the rep one, right?
Okay. So maybe
There's
it's the rep one.
Requirement. Yeah,
Okay, that's the attunement.
Or maybe I did the quest and forgot. That's possible too. Yeah.
All right. Sorry. There's one question just before I roll in, and this one was DM. Well, it was in chat, and then the person actually went and DM'd me in Discord, which I think was awesome. So the question actually is about, since you like rated BGs and you're part of that. The question was, is there been any conversation or anything on the Blizzard team prior to you leaving, whether the Hero of the Horde and the Hero of the Alliance achievement for a season for rated BGs. Right now, it's the top 0.1% of players. Is there a thought about switching it over towards the way Gladiator works for Arena, where it's 50 wins over a certain rating, a certain CR? Is there a reason why RBGs has stayed that 0.1% and not moved over to the same goalpost the way Arena was?
Yeah, good question. I'm not completely sure. I would probably say that it's probably supposed to be analogous to, say, the Gladiator title that you get in Arena. And so it's kind of like the RBG version of that, right? I think. And so that's probably my guess. Yeah, it's supposed to be kind of really the creme de la creme, get it in those two sort of systems.
Okay. So that's more like, I guess it's more like rank 1, because right now Gladiator for Arena is after you get so many wins at a certain rating, you got that. You get your mount, right?
Yeah.
So.
I know that's been talked about before. It's possible. It's possible that may change. I am sympathetic to kind of Arena does have more of a casual sort of avenue to get, like you said, Gladiator. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a good thing to bring up for sure.
Okay. It's just curious if that had been a conversation or not. So it sounds like it hasn't from how you're talking.
I mean, I think RBGs could use a little more oomph in terms of cool rewards that they get. For sure. And so, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea.
Yeah.
Nice.
I always really enjoyed them. All right, Andallyn, you get the epic question. I'm going to give it to you.
Okay. Sounds good. So at the end of our subject, we always like to take the topic and address what is the one thing you would change. So the premise behind this is you've got the entire budget is open wide. It doesn't even have to be possible as long as it's plausible, as long as it can be done. So with that being said, are we just going to talk about WoW deving in general, or how open or closed do you want to make this, Gerissar?
I mean, we're talking to a person that helped design and develop specs and PvP specific. So I'll leave it to you. But
okay,
I mean,
so I guess
why
don't we go? Why don't we go with this? So across the board of what the status of the game of World of Warcraft, what is the one thing you would change, if you could?
Yeah, that's a hard question.
I
One thing
know.
that would change. Um, hmm. I mean, I think there's many different things, but it's hard to pick just one. Um, one thing I think coming to mind now, just talking about VGs, is I think it'd be really cool if there is more of kind of categories of battlegrounds and they're more about gameplay type, right? And so you have like Warsong and other capture the flag maps. So you could have like a capture the flag category and a domination category or a
Hmm.
the like Arathi Basin and Deepwind Gorge kind of as a category. And so I think it'd be cool to flesh out more maps in different categories. And then maybe it'd be cool if each season there's a few of the categories that are active. Or one thing I used to like about Classic, and I think it was in PC even, is just there'd be like kind of battleground weekends where there'd be like a type of battleground.
Yep.
And so
We
it was like
call it
Warsong
arms.
weekend. So just everybody did Warsong exactly. And so, it'd be cool if that was brought back, but instead of it just being a specific map, it was kind of a category, right? It's like that's kind of a smaller, kind of not a big crazy kind of change in the game, but I'm reluctant to say some of them because they might do them. I don't want to like lick the cookie there. So yeah.
All right.
Sure, fair
Yeah.
enough.
I like it.
Absolutely.
Andallyn.
You want me to go next?
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm going to go with a classic Andalin answer here. The one thing that I would change is I would like to see a large pivot in directional, like the act of taking the game in a direction that's more and much more community focused. I would like to see a lot less of the game being created so that you can go do your own content or so that you can be more of an individual player. I'd love to see it become more of a community type of thing. Whether even if that was like zones started having like certain mayors or even just guild housing, and I'd love to see all these types of things that honestly like players like me who play the game to have fun with friends. That's the whole reason why we play the game. I was just talking with people about this earlier yesterday. Like we play arena and the rating's fun, but we play the game because we want to play with our friends, and this is the game that we enjoy with our friends. And to be able to enjoy that like we did with the guild was a lot of fun when we had guild perks and a lot of cool different things like that. I always wanted so much more to be built off of the guild perks, but it was just kind of gutted and it was gotten rid of. And I had so many ideas. I felt like that there could have been so much more growth in this direction, and encouraging, like in making your guilds unique and encouraging the community around there and making guild interactions. But that's the one thing I would like to change. I would love to see there be a huge push for more community based type of game interactions rather than just the individual unit interactions.
No, I totally agree with that. In my video and stuff, that's kind of the reason why I kind of felt like I didn't really mesh as much with the current game is because of things like that. And so I think that's a great answer. Should have been my answer, but yeah, I definitely
You already
agree
gave that
with
answer
you
in the video.
that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's and it's a challenge because kind of like what I said in the video is just that the modern game has it has a different vision and has a different type of player that it's created for. And so I'm kind of reading chat and there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't want the game to be about guilds, because it's just like you got to be in a guild, hardcore guild, or you're worthless. And so I certainly understand that, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a balance in how to do it, right? There's just if the game adds community based things and makes the guild a bigger part of the game and things like that, it doesn't necessarily have to ruin the experience for a solo player, right? Like there's a way to do it. And so I definitely agree with you if that should be a focus. of the game for sure. I think the guild is the lifeblood of the game. The guilds are. And so I remember back in the day when I was a guild leader in, say, BC or Lich King or whatever classic, when people were just thinking about quitting or leaving the raid or whatever, a lot of times I would be like on Ventrilo with them, trying to convince them, oh, it'll be fine. They're going to patch that problem, or just stick with it or whatever. Right? I was advocating for them to keep playing the game. And so I always felt like, man, I should get a paycheck from Blizzard just keeping all these people playing the game in my guild. And so yeah, that's what guilds do, is the communities keep people together. If you go into no one likes logging in and none of their guildmates are online. If that happens, and you're just like, well, maybe I don't want to play this game. What does everyone else play? I'll go play that.
Right.
And so yeah, it's important to the life of the guild is very, very important in my opinion.
I agree.
All right, let's hear it, man.
I would, Ian, and I would get rid of LFG, LFR, and make people have to actually group up into a main city, and then travel to the instance again. Go back to classic. So for PvP, like for random BG, like that stuff, sure. Or for rated BGs, yes, we can still do the talk to the champion in your main city, and he'll portal you to the instance PvP. But I really think we should go back to get rid of LFR, get rid of the LFG system where you just portal, and it removes the. I've seen too often where people just try to punt people out of a group just because they're not pulling what they think is ideal DPS or HPS or whatever, and they're not willing to at least work with the person. Even it's easier to just punt the person and wait for the next person in the queue to just appear. So
that's good,
and I think that goes back to the community.
Answer. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sympathetic to that desire, right? To kind of reinvigorate, have the player travel to the dungeon, or to encourage players to actually form groups rather than just hitting a button and randomly getting into a group, right? I think it's challenging with the current kind of player base. I think a lot of people would be upset if those things were removed. But do I think the best design is to have a game in lieu of those things and encourage people to have guilds and communities? I agree with you, which is kind of my reluctance to, I think there's a big desire for PvPers to have solo queue rated, right? And but I think really when you think about it, I think a huge problem in current games today, especially multiplayer online competitive games like League of Legends or Overwatch or whatever it is that there's a lot of toxicity in these games, and a lot of toxicity is created when you let players solo queue into competitive multiplayer matches where their progression is hinging on the other players winning the match with them, and so suddenly the player's enemy now is not the opposing team, it's their allies that they're playing with, and so they're yelling at each other about not performing or whatever it is, and that's what really causes a lot of toxicity. In WoW, you do get some toxicity if you do a LFG group playing arena or whatever it is, right? But it happens a lot less than it does in, say, Overwatch or League or whatever, right? Because you're creating a group with other people, you're inviting them, and you'd be surprised about how much that affects a social cohesion by inviting them to a group, a party that has a leader and things like that, than just being thrown into a random group, right? And I do think when you think about WoW, think about the community and this concept of social capital, right? Solo queue rated and gameplay systems like that can have a huge effect on the social capital of the game. And so, and I think when people think about LFR and they think about why they want it to removed, it's not because they don't want players who don't have a lot of time to do content that they enjoy. It's just that they care a lot about the social capital of the game. They think a lot about community, and so
I'll agree with that.
Yeah, so I think that's another. You guys both have really good answers. A lot better than mine, I think.
We've been thinking about it for a while. So.
Yeah.
I may have written the show notes, so I may know what to think ahead of time.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, you guys have people have surprised me before where I've had one in my head and it's the same one somebody else had thought, and I'm like, now I have to think another one. Oh no!
Yep.
So it's all good. It's all good. All right. Thank you very much, Chris. Love.
Yeah, I had a great
the
time.
Normally, the last.
Sorry, I couldn't stay longer tonight, but I'm always open to come on again some other time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That would be amazing, I think. All right. Well, I'll let you, because since you have raid in that, we'll let you go.
Yeah.
And we'll roll through the rest of the topics of interest that we talk about, which is the events and the news that we've
All right,
seen.
cool, great.
All right.
Well, thanks for having me on,
Thanks,
guys.
Chris.
I really appreciate it. Great time.
You're awesome.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank
Appreciate
you for
it.
coming.
All right.
Absolute
All
pleasure.
right, thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Take care.
Happy New Year to you too. Happy 2021. You successfully made it through 2020. Looking forward to your future.
All right, thanks, guys.
No worries. All right.
All right.
I think. Yeah. All
There
right.
we go.
I'll let. Okay.